Greetings YouTube, jwallace0317 here with some early release game footage of NCAA 13 in an online ranked game. And during the game I'll give a review of the entire game, which I can best summarize as the good, the bad, and the ugly, not necessarily in that order. But this will be a review of the game for the seasoned video football gamer and not someone necessarily new to the franchise. The game that I'm playing here is against the usual online ranked idiot. You'll see he runs the situational no huddle. You know, he doesn't have an offense that's a no huddle offense. He's not doing a 2-minute drill. He'll throw an incomplete pass and then start no huddling. And then you'll see some nice nonsense at the end when he realizes the game is lost. But these online ranked games really are just, at this early stage, are useful only for testing out the new game, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. I tinkered with a couple of formations that I haven't really used that much in the past. I think one of them was a new formation to this year. It's a wing bone formation. But really just the idea is just to get a feel for the game and how it plays. Okay, so NCAA 13. You know, this is a franchise I think that's on the ropes. If I could summarize an entire review of the game, I would say that it's NCAA 12 version 2.0. It may not even be version 2.0. I think it might be version 1.1. It's just, it's pretty uninspired. I mean, you get a tip off to that when you start up the game. Even the menu music is the same as NCAA 12. The intro to the game, you know, the thing that you watch when you first boot it up and then never watch again, usually has some motivation to it. It has some energy to it, and for this year's game, there's just kind of this weird Heisman themed intro that I don't know. It's boring. It doesn't really excite you, and so it's uninspired is probably the best word I would use. It's very clear that the major thrust of resources from EA's standpoint has been pushed into Madden this year, with NCAA really being relegated to a truly second-tier game that's just not positioned to have nearly as much value. I mean, the EA just kind of threw in the towel, it seems, on this game. Okay, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to finish on a positive note, so I'm going to cover these things in reverse order. And so let's start talking about the ugly. Somehow, this game has taken a step back on the visuals. I don't know how year in, year out, you know, generally speaking, the visuals for the game have been more and more impressive, but at least as I can see it, the colors are kind of washed out on the field. There's just not as much vibrance to the colors. The field is still a mess. From a certain angle, there's just this flat two-dimensional look to the field. And even before you even get into the game, the menu screen is a mess. I mean, they kind of screwed up the menu screen. The one from NCAA 12 was neat, you know, fairly organized. You knew how to get to where you needed to go, and for whatever reason, it's just really jarring when you're flipping through the different parts of the menu. It's kind of shifts, angles. Anyway, just kind of strange. The most annoying visual, though, that falls into the ugly category is the motion blur. We had been sold by EA on this motion blur concept where if a player was, you know, had a sudden change of movement, you would see this little bit of blur that is not supposed to be something you notice all that much. But what's weird is that The only time I ever noticed the motion blur was when a player would be getting up off the ground. Like a play would be over, and then the player is kind of abruptly getting up from the ground, and you would see a blur. I mean, that's the only time you actually notice it, and that's when you really shouldn't notice a blur. So, just kind of bizarre. But that's the ugly. Now let's talk about the bad. Uh, we still have pretty much the same situation with custom playbooks. You can, I slapped together a playbook for this game, uh, just to, kind of test it out. And I noticed that there were a couple of formations where, there were formation audibles that were missing. You add a formation to a playbook, and then you go into a game, and there's no play action audible, there's no run audible, that type of thing. So that's all just like NCAA 12. Front four pressure, basic defensive line pressure is pretty non-existent. In fact, it feels like it's weaker than NCAA 12. I mean, if you want to bring pressure, it seems like you've got to bring 6 or 7. And even if you're only sending 4, I mean, you shouldn't be getting consistent pressure with a front 4. It should be occasional if you've got some real studs on the D line, but it seems like you're really getting nothing when you're just sending your 4 linemen or even your 4 linemen and blitzing a linebacker. So we may be in a situation where we're going back even before NCAA 12, where you're either going to have to send the house or you're going to have to do max coverage defenses to where you're pushing it to the extreme one way or the other. Some other items that go into the bad category, and I don't know if this was online lag or not, but there seems to be a clunkiness to the controls pre-snap, almost as if the game can barely handle its own programming. I didn't notice, it's not something I felt with NCAA 12, but for whatever reason, I'm seeing it now, and I've also experienced some difficulty in audibling plays, audibling to one defensive play and then quickly deciding to audible to another, and I was not able to do that. So I don't know if that has to do with if it's a custom playbook issue or not, but that's another issue. Let me get to some of the more important bad stuff. Zone defense. Somehow zone defense has gotten worse. We were sold on the concept of improved zone defense for NCAA 12, and now I think it's either on a par with NCAA 11 or it's actually a little worse. You've got defenders clearly not following assignments. You've got guys you've got a guy in a buzz zone, and he's not defending the curl. Instead, he's going to the flat. There were some situations where it looked like if you wanted to have an effective buzz zone, you had to also send a defender to the flat on the same side, and then you would get correct, the player assigned to the buzz zone would play correctly. And then you have some issues again with the safeties. It seems like either, sometimes the deep ball seems to be defended correctly, but then I've already noticed numerous times where throwing up over the top was far too easy. And throwing up over the top should never be easy against cover 4 if your 4 cover defenders are reasonably good defenders. It shouldn't be easy to throw up over the top, and yet I've seen guys do that already just in a handful of online ranked games up to this point. Okay, another item in the bad category is the much maligned option defense. This was something that I railed about for NCAA 12. I've always said this, the NCAA series has had a much bigger burden than the Madden team when it comes to making sure that the game's engine can handle the sheer variety of offensive and defensive schemes that exist at the college level. I mean, just with respect to offenses, there are just so many different types of offenses, creativity with formations that don't exist to that degree in the NFL. And one of those areas of particular concern is the option. And this franchise has never really figured out how to handle the option the right way. What we're getting in this game for NCAA 13, at least so far, is we're still getting edge defenders freezing. Edge defenders sliding backwards, and just they're either in a trance, or they're sliding backwards on skates, or just the reaction is just ridiculous. And so, unfortunately, that's just. I don't think it's any better or worse than NCAA 12. It just appears to be the same for the most part. One thing I did notice is that I've seen less of the crashing cornerback. For some plays in NCAA 12, the cornerback on the play side for any running play, whether it's option or not an option running play, the cornerback on the play side would crash in totally unobstructed. Now, I haven't seen that as much, but what I'm still seeing is on option runs, when your quarterback gets to the edge, you're seeing defenders just simply standing there and not making any kind of decision about how to address the ball carrier or the pitch man, and that's problematic. To finish the bad category, we still have alignment issues presenting themselves on defense. It seems like what the NCAA team was able to do, to a certain extent, is to have players assigned to zones line up closer to what they would line up in if it was man coverage, and that's nice. Setting aside the fact that the people, the guys in the zone assignments are not going to play their zone assignments, but they're at least lining up in a way that conceals the coverage somewhat. But in the 4-2-5, any 4-2-5 formation, or 3-3-5 in particular, you're still getting the same crummy alignment problems where you end up audibling, say, to a man coverage defense, and you've got someone totally across the field who's responsible for an offensive player on the other side, and of course these kinds of things lead to wide open touchdown passes. So we still have the alignment problems. Okay, so we've talked about the ugly, we've talked about the bad. What is good about NCAA 13? What is there that we can at least dish out some kind of compliment on? Well, I think the obvious one is the passing mechanic. There's no question that the trajectories and the specific passing mechanics that the quarterback is using now in the game is much better than it has ever been. So I'll give some credit where credit is due on that. So for example, dig routes. If you were throwing to a dig last year, if you had a linebacker anywhere close to the passing lane, that was going to be tipped or picked off on a dig route. Now you can throw to the dig route if the coverage would permit that throw. You can complete that pass. The other thing I'm noticing as well is, and this was advertised, the ability to throw over the shoulder, the ability to throw a receiver into space, like say on corner routes. Certainly you can do that much better now, much easier now. Now, I did notice a little bit of a quirk it did not happen in this game, but it was a game versus the CPU where I had a receiver running slant, and I used the total control passing to turn the slant into a post. And this was not an option route, so the receiver would have had no clue that I was going to overthrow the slant to such a degree that it would basically make it like I was throwing to a post. But the receiver, completely mind reading the quarterback, started to run towards the ball as if he knew that's where the ball was going to go when I threw to that makeshift post route. And so when you take a look at the total control passing, it's great, but when you combine that with defenders, for example, in zone coverage, defenders not really being able to play their assignments well, you can see some real potential for abuse on the passing side. I really think that this year, if you have a user who's excellent at the passing game, he's going to be really unstoppable. Because the passing game has been geared up so much. Not just on the total control passing, but also, for example, on crossing routes, receivers now run a lot. They'll run a lot more naturally after the catch. They won't do that little stutter stop that sometimes happens when you throw to a receiver on a crossing route. Screen passes are much more doable. I think screen passes are going to be a huge weapon this year compared to last year. The auto drop back on the screen passes is done pretty well. I got smashed a few times on some screen passes coming from under center in this game, but I've been able to execute them at other times, and out of the shotgun, the screen passes they work a lot better. So that's good. More good stuff. There's less route mirroring and route jumping by defenders. That's part of the read and react defense that was advertised. I won't say that it's gone though. I've still seen route mirroring. In fact, it was on a dig route where the defender did not jump the route, but moved with the receiver step for step as if he was mind reading him. But I've seen less of that in this version of the game than in NCAA 12. So overall, that's a plus. Some other tweaks to the offense that I think have been effectively done is in the power runs. Any kind of power run where you have a pulling lineman, it looks like the engine has tweaked up the acceleration of the pulling lineman. Now, what the pulling lineman does once he's out in front looking for someone to block is a different story. You still see some idiocy there, but at least there's more acceleration on the pull so that you have a chance of making use of that blocker. So, for example, QB power runs and QB wraps, those types of plays, which were pretty useless, I think, for NCAA 12, can be workable now. And I guess one last positive item, somewhat related to what I said about the pulling lineman, is that your quarterback acceleration on any QB running play, and particularly with option runs, you've got increased quarterback acceleration, which is going to get a quarterback like Denard Robinson out to the edge much more frequently. You're going to be able to make use of his speed. I was able to execute several read option runs, at least when I made the correct keep or give decision, which I kind of botched that a few times in this game. But when you make the correct decision and you have a QB with the right attributes, you'll be able to make more use of the mobile QB in the option game. But all of this is still subject to the same asterisk that I mentioned before, which is that if the defensive AI is as terrible as it can be with respect to the option, then there's going to be a whiff of cheddar to an option-based offense for NCAA 13. So to wrap it up, if you're a hardcore video football gamer, if you're a frequent purchaser, you're probably going to want to purchase this year's version of the game. But if you're more discriminating, and if you really feel like you hated NCAA 12, then you're probably not going to want to buy NCAA 13. I'll be running my online dynasty for another season. I like the online dynasty mode. I like playing with guys that I've played against for several years now. But I think for those guys, for the online dynasty addicts, you're probably still going to buy this game, but I would suggest reading up on some of the better, more detailed written reviews, such as one that G. Schwent did over at the Gaming Tailgate, which very concisely lays out, an itemization of all of the defensive flaws in particular. Because I think if you're going to play the game in a competitive context, you need to go in with your eyes open. Everybody should know what all the warts are, so there's really no, complaining about the wins or losses because you know what you're stepping into. But otherwise, if you're not the hardcore gamer, if you're not a big online dynasty guy, I'd suggest waiting to buy Madden 13. I haven't even played a demo of that game yet, but I really feel like it's going to be a much superior product. So anyway, thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed the review and the game footage. See you around.